The bridge was old and made of gray stone. The river below moved dark and very still. It was long past midnight in the quiet city. Not one single light burned on that lonely street. A cold mist rose slowly from the dark water. It curled softly around the iron lamp on the bridge. The lamp gave only a weak and tired glow. It flickered once and then stayed very dimly on. A man stood alone at the center of it. He was not moving at all in that moment. His back was turned to the city behind him. His face was turned toward the open dark sky. He wore a long gray coat worn very thin. It was the same coat he had worn for years. On his back sat a faded brown canvas bag. It was the only bag he had brought along. He breathed out and his breath made small white clouds. The winter air was sharp and clean around him. From the city behind there was no sound at all. The whole world felt like it was holding its breath. He was not sad in the usual quiet way. He was something harder and deeper and slower than sad. He was a man who had chosen a hard thing. And now he stood at the very beginning of it. He looked down at the dark water far below. He thought, this is where a new life starts now. Then he turned around slowly and faced the road ahead. He began to walk forward without looking back at all. His name was Arjun and he had just turned 30. He had grown up in a small quiet town. It was a gentle town beside a slow old river. The streets were narrow and lined with old neem trees. Children played cricket in the evening dusk every single day. Old men sat at chai shops talking until the dark. Arjun's father ran a small hardware shop near the market. His hands were always rough from iron and old wood. His mother was a schoolteacher who loved to quietly read. She always had a book open on the kitchen table. They were not a rich family but they were full. Full of love and effort and quiet and simple dignity. Arjun was a serious boy who thought about everything deeply. He asked questions that his teachers could not always answer. He read everything he could find in their small library. Poetry and history and old story books from dusty shelves. At 16 he discovered that he loved to write things. He would fill whole notebooks in a single rainy weekend. He wrote about the old men at the chai shop. He wrote about the river and the light at evening. He wrote about his mother reading and his father working. He wrote about all the feelings too heavy to carry alone. His father found one notebook tucked under his pillow once. He read 2 pages and then put it back carefully. He never said a word about it to anyone at all. But his eyes were very soft that evening at dinner. Arjun studied hard and did well in every school subject. He got good marks and made his parents quietly proud. After college he sat for the government job entrance exams. He cleared them on his very first try with ease. The whole town heard about it within a single day. People came to their home with congratulations and trays of sweets. His father shook hands with everyone with a wide smile. His mother made tea for every single person who came. That night he sat alone on the dark rooftop. He should have felt very happy but he only felt tired. He took the job because it was the right thing. He took it for his father's rough and tired hands. He took it for his mother's years of quiet sacrifice. He took it because he did not know anything better. But deep inside him there was always this old feeling. A feeling like a bird flying again and again into glass. He kept on writing in secret every single night alone. He wrote in small notebooks hidden carefully under his mattress. The writing was the only place he truly felt himself. Outside of it he felt like he was only performing. 7 years passed in this quiet and divided kind of way. 7 years of good mornings and empty nights and secret books. He got small promotions and always did his work well. No one could say anything at all bad about him. But the emptiness inside him was growing very slowly now. Like a small crack in a wall that no one sees. One rainy Tuesday his senior called him into the office. He was offered a senior post with much better pay. His senior smiled and said this was a great chance. He said that Arjun was among their very best people. Arjun smiled politely and said he was very grateful indeed. He walked back to his desk and sat down slowly. He looked at his computer screen for a long while. The numbers and reports on it meant nothing to him. He imagined his life 10 more years from that moment. He saw the same desk and the same empty feeling inside. He picked up his pen and opened his small notebook. The notebook was always in the inside pocket of his jacket. He wrote only 3 small words on the white page. The words were, "I cannot stay." He stared at them for a very long time after. Then he closed the notebook and put his pen down. That evening he drove home through the quiet rain slowly. He did not turn on the radio in the car. He sat in his parked car for 2 full hours. He watched raindrops slide slowly down the glass of the window. Each drop moved slowly and found its own way down. He thought, even a raindrop knows where it needs to go. He went inside and ate a very quiet dinner alone. That night he could not sleep at all until dawn. He got up in the dark and sat at his desk. He pulled out every single notebook he had ever written in. There were 26 of them stacked inside an old box. He read from the very first one until the light came. They were good. He felt this very clearly in his heart. They were not perfect, but they were true and deeply honest. The next morning he wrote his resignation letter very carefully. It took him only 10 minutes to write it all out. He printed it and held the paper gently in both hands. His hands shook a little, but his eyes were completely clear. He walked to his senior's office and knocked on the door. He placed the letter on the desk without saying a word. His senior read the letter slowly and then looked up. He asked Arjun twice if this was really his final choice. Arjun said yes each time in a calm and quiet voice. His senior shook his hand and wished him well slowly. Arjun packed his small desk things into one thin paper bag. There was only a pen and one small faded photo inside. The photo was of him and his parents at home. They were all laughing at something he could no longer remember. He walked out of that building for the very last time. The sun outside was warm and sharp and very bright that day. He stood on the steps and breathed the open air in. He felt something leave him and something new enter him at once. He drove to his parents' home that same quiet evening. He had not called ahead and just came quietly alone. His mother opened the door and read his face right away. She stepped back and let him inside without saying anything at all. His father sat in his old chair near the small fan. He put his newspaper down and waited quietly for the news. Arjun sat down on the floor between his 2 parents. He told them everything in a slow and very careful voice. No one spoke for a long and very heavy moment after. The ceiling fan turned slowly above all three of them silently. His father was the first one to speak in the end. He asked one single question: "How will you live now, son?" Arjun said he had savings enough to last a few months. He said he planned to write and try hard to publish. His father looked at him for a very long quiet time. Then he nodded once very slowly and said nothing more at all. His mother got up quietly and went to make some tea. When she came back, her eyes were a little bit red. She sat down very close beside him on the cool floor. She took his hand and held it tightly without speaking at all. That simple touch said everything that words could never possibly say. Arjun looked at her hand and felt his whole throat tighten up. They sat together like that for most of that long evening. The tea grew cold slowly and nobody minded even a little. He moved to a small rented room in the big city. The room had one window and faced a clear open sky. There was a wooden table and a thin old mattress inside. He put his box of notebooks under the table very first. He placed his pen and blank paper on the tabletop carefully. He looked at the empty room and felt completely and totally alone. But the loneliness did not feel cruel or sharp that moment. It felt like the quiet before something very important slowly begins. He began writing each morning right after waking up each day. He wrote for 3 or 4 hours without stopping at all. Then he walked to a nearby dhaba for his simple meal. He ate slowly and watched the busy street outside the window. The people outside all moved fast with many places to be. He watched them and wrote small quiet notes in his book. Everything he saw became material for his slow and careful stories. Every face on the street told him something very new each day. The money started to run very low after just 2 months. Some days he only had enough money for one small meal. He submitted his first story to 12 different journals online one morning. All 12 of them sent back polite and hollow rejection letters. He submitted the second story to 15 more journals after that. Most of them did not even write back to him at all. By the 3rd month his savings were nearly all completely gone. He sat at his table that evening and looked at the numbers. He had just enough money left for 1 more month of rent. After that he truly did not know what he would do next. He thought about calling his father and asking him for help. He picked up his phone and then put it back down. He did not want to prove everyone right about his choice. That stubbornness kept him going forward on the very hardest days. One afternoon he just sat on the cold floor quietly alone. He had written nothing at all for 3 whole long days. A soft knock came at his door that still afternoon. He opened it to find an old man standing there gently. The old man had white hair and very warm and kind eyes. He held a covered steel bowl carefully in both his old hands. He said his name was Ramu from the very next room. He had made extra dal and rice alone that afternoon. Arjun stood at the door and did not know what to say. Ramu smiled very gently and held out the warm bowl toward him. Arjun took it slowly and said thank you very quietly indeed. Ramu asked softly if he could come in for some tea. Arjun stepped aside gently and let the old man come inside. They sat together at the small wooden table facing each other. Ramu looked around the room slowly and carefully without any comment. His eyes found the pile of old notebooks under the table. He asked in a low voice, "Are you a writer, young man?" Arjun said quietly that he was only trying hard to become one. Ramu nodded as if that was a perfectly reasonable answer indeed. He sat quietly and asked no more questions for now at all. They drank their tea and watched the slow evening fall outside. The sky turned very slowly from orange to pink to gray. Then Ramu spoke in a low and very careful quiet voice. He said he had been a schoolteacher for 35 long years. He said he once wanted to be a singer instead. But his family had told him that singing was not serious. He became a teacher and was a very good one indeed. But every birthday evening he sang one song alone by himself. He sang it quietly to himself before he went to sleep. It was the one small space he had kept only for himself. He looked at Arjun very directly and then said this slowly. He said, "You are braver than I ever was in my life." Arjun shook his head quietly and said he was only scared. Ramu said, "That is exactly what brave truly looks like, son." Those words settled into Arjun like warm tea in deep winter. He felt something unknot itself somewhere very deep inside his chest. Ramu left when the room had grown dark and quietly cool. He patted Arjun's shoulder gently at the door before leaving that night. That night Arjun wrote for 5 straight hours at his table. The words came fast and felt deeply honest and completely real. He finished a complete short story before the night fully ended. It was the best thing he had ever written before this. He read it back twice in the very early morning quiet. He knew it was real and knew it was ready now. He submitted it to one small literary journal that same morning. Then he closed his laptop and went out alone to walk. He walked for 2 hours through the waking city that morning. He did not think about the story or the journal at all. He walked and watched and felt the whole city quietly around him. A kite flew alone above the rooftops in the pale sky. He watched it move so freely and felt something like simple joy. Not a big loud feeling but something small and quietly warm inside. Ramu became a steady part of his quiet daily life after that. He came by every few evenings with some small and simple food. Sometimes he brought rice and sometimes he brought something gently sweet. They always ended up talking together for an hour or two quietly. Ramu told him stories about his many students over long years. He told him about students who had surprised him the most deeply. He said every person has one true thing living inside them. The lucky ones find it and the brave ones always follow. Arjun asked him very quietly, "What if I find it too late?" Ramu said, "It is never too late when the heart still knows." One quiet evening Arjun read Ramu a part of his new story. He read it slowly and watched the old man's face very closely. Ramu sat with his eyes half closed and listened very deeply. His face was perfectly still and calm like a quiet evening pond. When Arjun finished reading there was a long and soft silence. Then Ramu opened his eyes slowly and they were very wet indeed. He did not say very many words at all right then. He said only this story needed to exist in this world. Arjun could not look up from the page just then at all. He blinked slowly and breathed very carefully and quietly through his nose. That was the first time anyone had ever heard his writing aloud. It felt like being truly seen for the very first honest time. 4 months later a thin white envelope arrived quietly for him. It was from a small literary journal based far away in Chennai. He found it on the floor just inside his door that day. He stood and held the envelope in his hand for a long minute. He had been afraid to open letters exactly like this one before. They had always said the same polite and empty and hollow words. But this one felt slightly different even through the plain paper itself. He could not explain why exactly, but he simply quietly felt it. He sat down on his thin mattress and opened it very slowly. The letter was one short paragraph on clean and simple white paper. He read it once carefully and then read it again very quietly. He put it on his lap slowly and then closed both eyes. The journal wanted to publish his story in their very next issue. They said his writing was quiet but struck them very deeply inside. Arjun sat on his mattress in complete and total and still silence. The room was the same and the world outside was fully unchanged. But inside Arjun something had shifted completely and quietly and forever. Not loudly or dramatically, but simply and completely and deeply inside him. He thought about that cold and rainy Tuesday evening in the car. He thought about those 3 small quiet words he had written alone. I cannot stay. Those 3 words had started everything for him. They were the most important words he had ever written in his life. He called his mother and the phone rang only twice before she answered. She picked up quickly with a soft and already ready hello. His voice shook a little when he first started to speak. He told her a small journal had accepted his short quiet story. There was a brief silence on her end before she made any sound. Then she made a soft small sound he had never heard before. It was somewhere between a soft and quiet laugh and a tear. She said, I knew it, Beta. I always knew it would happen. Then his father's voice came slowly and thickly on the line. He said only this, I am so very proud of you, son. Arjun pressed the phone hard against his ear and against his cheek. He could not say one single word back for a long while. He just breathed and they all breathed gently together on the phone. That was more than enough, and it was truly and quietly everything. He went to Ramu's door that very same evening at dusk. Ramu opened the door and saw his face and smiled right away. He said, good news always has its very own face, young man. Arjun told him, and Ramu sat and listened and nodded very slowly. Then the old man did something that Arjun had not expected at all. He turned and found an old small bottle resting on his shelf. It was sharbat he had been saving for a very special day. He poured 2 small glasses very carefully and handed one to Arjun. He raised his glass slowly and looked at Arjun with very warm eyes. He said quietly, to the hard path and to where it truly leads. They drank the sharbat slowly together in the quiet fading evening light. It was sweet and cold and tasted exactly like something long and honestly earned. The story was published on a quiet and still Wednesday morning. Arjun saw it there online and sat very still and breathed slowly. His name was printed at the very top of the clean page. His words were below it, neat and clean and completely real. 3 different readers wrote to the journal about that one small story. They each said it had touched something very quiet and true inside them. Arjun read each message slowly before finally putting his phone down. He thought, so there really are others who feel this same quiet way. That single thought made him feel less alone than ever before in his life. That was the real and honest reason he had ever wanted to write at all. Not for fame and not for money or any kind of reward. but to make even one other person feel less quietly alone. That evening he sat beside his window as the slow night came. The city below was full of warm and distant lights and sounds. He thought about all the hard and heavy days that had passed. The hungry days and the silent and long and lonely nights alone. He did not regret one single hour of any of it all. Every hard day had quietly given him something real and deeply true. The rejections had made his skin stronger without ever once numbing him. The loneliness had carved space inside him to finally know himself well. The hunger had quietly taught him what truly mattered to him most. And the fear had turned slowly and completely and quietly into courage. He opened his old notebook to a blank and completely empty page. He picked up his pen and began to write slowly all over again. He wrote about a man who stood alone on a cold bridge. A man who turned from the city and walked forward without fear. He wrote slowly and carefully, and each single word felt deeply true. The story was real because the very life behind it honestly was. Outside the night was cool and full of very clear quiet stars. Somewhere below a small child laughed briefly and then went peacefully silent. Somewhere very near a woman sang softly to herself completely alone. Life moved all around him gently like a slow and very warm river. Arjun wrote on and felt quiet and whole and completely and softly alive. He had chosen the hard path forward without any map at all. But every single step had been slowly leading him right here to this. Here to this room and this page and this quiet and honest life. Not a perfect life, but a completely and deeply and truly real one. And a real life is the only life that is truly worth living. He smiled very quietly at that simple truth as he kept writing on. Dawn would come very soon and he would still be sitting right here. Still writing and still breathing and still gently on his chosen hard path. And finding slowly and beautifully that it was worth every single thing.